Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
132 in Bush, I've got him at gunpoint. Check the left phone, we're going to pull them out, you want your side.
We're pulling them out.
10-1-1, advise ready for camp.
God!
Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Chuck, and I will be greeted and graced with the presence of Tom here very shortly. He is stuck in some snow, so we are waiting on him to get here. But until we do, I'm going to introduce everyone to Randall Doizaki. I probably just murdered that. He told me how to do it, and it's a very uncommon name. And as I was told, it is actually Japanese, correct?
Yes, it is. There are not very many of us.
No, I mean it's a wild Doizaki. How do you pronounce it? Doizaki. Okay, how it looks.
Yeah, quick and simple, just like Smith.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. Just like Smith, common spelling.
Yes.
So
we're an uncommon family, though.
Right, I bet. So Randall is a retired lieutenant, Arapahoe sheriff, and now he runs public safety for schools. How's that?
That you're pretty much spot on.
Yeah. Great thing. You and the other host that runs the show with me, Tom, I think you guys have like a similar job. Very, very similar. He runs for the school district, runs a bunch of the security and a bunch of the stuff like that. Sounds like you do something similar. So yes, you guys are when he gets here, I'm gonna let him know that that's what you do, and he's gonna be like, oh, that's what I do, and it's gonna be great. He's gonna love it. So you started your career in law enforcement at Arapahoe?
Correct. So originally out of high school, I went to Marine Corps, did a tour of duty in the Marine Corps, and got out, a number of other things. And there's a long story behind why I went into law enforcement. But I started law enforcement when I was 31.
Wow,
a little bit older than most.
So we always ask this question, why did you get involved in law enforcement? And most of the time people are like, oh, it's from a child early age, but you joined at 31. So what bit you? What was the bug that bit you? What caused you to want to come in later in life?
Well, I'd actually looked at law enforcement when I got out of the Marine Corps, and I'm going to date myself here. I got out of the Marine Corps in 1986. So I'm a little bit older than a lot of people.
How old were you when you went in?
I was 18. I went in right out of high school.
Oh, so you were thinking about doing a career.
Yeah. So I went to the Marine Corps as a bit of a scrapper, troublemaker in high school. I'm known more for my fights and my temper at that age. But no, I got out of the Marine Corps and did a number of other things. And I reflected back on it. And the challenge for me, Chuck, is I was 11 years old and my family was held hostage here in Denver.
Oh, my gosh.
And I don't talk a lot about it. I don't put it out there because it is a personal right. The law enforcement is not about me. The thing I remember about that is my dad sitting between the dining room table and the wall with my 2-year-old sister in his lap.
Oh my God.
And he couldn't do anything to protect his family. The guy came in, took my mom to the door with the gun and ribs, all that stuff. And it's pretty traumatic. 11 years old. I'm like 5-6 feet away from this guy. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. And then move forward.
11 years old. Yeah, you're so young. Holy crap.
It was tough. And then move forward to when I got out of the Marine Corps. I'd been married about a year, a little bit under a year. My wife, still married to the same wonderful woman, 37 years, very patient woman, all the way through my career in law enforcement. Okay. She was a teller at a bank when individual came in and robbed the bank, pointed a gun, and there was an plainclothes officer working the bank because he was a serial bank robber here in the Denver area. Officer told him, came around the bottom of the counter, told him, drop the weapon. He turned, pointed at the officer. Officer shot and killed him in front of my wife. Had he come in 5 minutes later, my wife was leaving that day. She was the teller he came in to rob.
Right.
So I go back to my Marine Corps attitude. I'm the consequence of their action. So law enforcement, when people say about to serve and protect, my end goal is I'm that Rottweiler sitting at the door and working in the school district. I'm sure others can understand. I'm not the sheepdog. I'm not that guy that just stands there. I'm the Rottweiler. I walk in, you know what you're getting. And and that's what it's been.
See, older mentality of policing, ask, tell, make. I'm going to come and I'm going to tell you what to do. If you don't do it, I'm going to make you do it.
Yeah. Well,
and if I have to go hands-on, I'm going hands-on and make sure you remember.
Yes.
Don't ever do that again.
Yeah. My wife has always been on my case about getting involved in fights. She says, you've got deputies for that. You're the sergeant, you're the lieutenant. I said, yeah, but they swing on somebody. I'm the first one that's going to swing back. Don't.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to work for a sergeant or a lieutenant like that. And I did. And, you know, they were awesome. Sometimes we called them P4s as a sergeant because they couldn't let go of patrol. So they would be, because we have like P2s, which are patrol officers, P3s that are training officers, and then we call sergeants who couldn't get out of the who couldn't just stop operating as P4s. And we're like, hey, it's cool. I worked for a couple of those guys and they were awesome. So that's great. But I want to go back a little bit. You were 11 years old and your family got held up at gunpoint, and it sounds to be like a home invasion robbery.
No, what had happened is it's a Saturday morning. So I'm going to go back. This was in 1975.
Yeah.
Saturday morning, my little brother and I were laying in the living room floor watching cartoons. A couple of guys had robbed a store in another area of the city, 5-10 minute drive from the house. Came down through the neighborhood back. They lived in our neighborhood. Officer marked units saw the vehicle, gave chase. The individuals were running through backyards to get away from the officers. Well, one of them, he threw a rake and shovel or whatever at an officer and got shot. And he said, I was just taking a walk and the officer started chasing me. But the other guy got into our backyard. The dogs were barking. My mom, and we had little dogs at the time. Right now, I've got a 90-pound Rottweiler Shepherd here in the house. So don't come in my house uninvited. But they had little dogs, like a little poodle type stuff. Yeah. Dogs are barking. My mom opened the patio door. The guy came in the house and he went to the top of the stairs. He said, hide me. And he's got a money bag. Now, my dad, him and I, like most parents, had an issue, but my dad used to own a bar here in Denver. He was a partner. So he'd fought with drunks. He'd been robbed. He'd knife point. He's a pretty hard individual growing up. And my mom said get out of the house. She left the dining room, went to the kitchen where the phone was at, and he pulled a gun out, pointed at my dad and little sister, and he told my little brother to get up and over to the table. And we had a great big picture window in the front of the house on Saturday morning. All the curtains are open. It's a nice sunshiny day. And Denver PD was going through the neighborhood. And they try to come in our door and they see us sitting there and nobody's moving.
Right.
So something's up. Denver PD surrounded the house. They even ran through our neighbors. They knocked on our neighbor's door, said, we going into your backyard. Like, okay. They went through and got up on their shed, on their garage, watching the back of the house. And we had a great big rock garden in the front of the house. And they were down out, they were surrounded. But the guy took my mom to the door and said, he's not coming out. Yeah. And he finally gave up.
Right.
My dad said if the other guy had come in the house, there'd be trouble because my dad had fought with the other guy. He knew the guy from the bar, so, and then we went through a whole thing with that. And at 11 years old, we're like, and I think one of the most traumatic things for me was my dad sitting there with my little sister, and there's nothing he could do. My dad would have gone tooth and nail. My dad would have gone down. And same for a lot of us in law enforcement. That Marine mentality. There's gunfight. We're running towards it, not away from it.
100%.
And it was 11 years old. It still bothers me to this day.
I bet. That's traumatic shit.
The look on my dad's face.
The helplessness that normally men aren't helpless. They're very capable. They can do something. And then all of a sudden you just see your dad, who's this hero for you, and he can't do anything. And you're like, oh shit, this is scary. Now, did that lead you into going into your biggest reason for going into the military and going in the Marine Corps?
As I said earlier, I was a bit of a scrapper. I was always a hothead. I was always known for fights. And I said I had to get out and do something with it. And I had to get a direction. Right. And I delayed entry. I turned 18 in January. 3 days later, I enlisted. My dad, he went off because I didn't talk to him. I said, I need to do something. And this this will push me to the limit. And it refined that. It put an edge to what was already there. And that came out in law enforcement. And that's how I led the teams that I worked with, that I had the honor to work with. And it was that mentality, that honor, integrity, tact, loyalty, all that goes with the team. And it's critical in law enforcement. As you
100%.
know.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people nowadays, and I feel like they're lacking on half of that stuff. Honor, courage, commitment. Is main core values in the Marine Corps. Honor, courage, commitment, integrity, everything we say and do. And they preach that in a lot of agencies. They at least try to, but you get people who come in who are cowardly.
Yeah.
They have zero courage. Gunfire goes off and they're cowering, but you never know what's going to happen when gunfire pops off. And,
you don't. I've seen the best people freeze.
Yep.
Hesitate.
So, yeah, me too. And I'm like, dude, and so I don't really fault him for that, but there's I've seen some cowardice, and I feel like that we need to get back to a lot of that, more stressed academies and harder FDOs, harder sergeants. It's a paramilitary organization, and I see too much of it nowadays. We're too soft. And it's just not, it doesn't bode well. And you see a lot of this stuff, especially in LA. You see a lot of that stuff where you have, and the coppers on the ground are great, but you have a lot of command staff up there that maybe they're scared, or maybe I don't know if it's they're coward, or if they're just afraid of backlash from, powers that be above them. And they're just like, hey, but the big topic right now going around is kind of a current event for people not listening, or for people watching and listening. We're talking today on February 3rd. So there have been some stuff that's happened yesterday and today in California, especially with, some of the riots regarding the deportation and things like that, and the wall over in Mexico on the border and things like that, and yada yada. And people are protesting, but they were blocking freeways and stuff like that, and they were blocking all these on-ramps and stuff. So you have cops lining up, and then basically they got told to stand down and just go away and let them do their own thing. I'm like, well, if they don't have a permit and they're protesting, it's okay to protest. That's your right in the United States, but at some point you have to be like, this is unlawful protest because you didn't go through the correct measures. You're doing other things. Maybe you're breaking things or vandalizing things. When you get a group that big, they do damage. And, it's just, I don't know. I feel like a lot has gone away from the main core values of honor, courage, commitment, integrity, and everything we say and do. Because I see a lot of people, or a lot of cops, and I'm not talking shit on cops at all. I just see a lot of people in command and stuff. Like they're just, I don't know. They're scared, I think, is what it is. And a lot of CYA is going around and save your own ass. And it's Semper I, fuck the other guy, excuse my language, but it feels like a lot like that. And it sucks because you're an old school copper. I have an old school mindset too. That's how I was kind of brought up. And that's definitely how you were brought up. And I feel like cops are like fathers and mothers disciplining their children sternly so they don't do it again. And they know not to do that again. But now you have, people who are like, yeah, it's okay. Maybe don't do that, and lack of consequences and things like that. And it's getting way violent and dangerous, and it's bad for officer safety. And I'm assuming you see a lot of that as well going on in the world. And you're just like, wow, this is crazy. What is it like being the type of copper that you are, having that strong mentality from the Marine Corps, being super progressive, proactive and aggressive? What do you think about what you're seeing nowadays? If I can just pick your brain on that.
There's a couple of things. One of my duties when I was a lieutenant with the sheriff's office, I ended my career as a lieutenant in the jail. I did jail patrol investigations as a deputy and made sergeant, and moved around a little bit, and ended up in the jail toward the end of my career. But I also oversaw the special intervention unit. And here in Arapahoe County, they had what they call the RISE program, Restoring Individuals Safely and Effectively Competency. And these were individuals who had been charged with a crime, but were deemed incompetent to proceed with trial. So they partnered with the State Office of Behavioral Health. So it was Fort Logan or Pueblo State Hospital, and they brought in therapists and reentry and psychologists and psychiatrists and all these people in. They went into part of the jail and they tried to make it suicidal prevention. They change all the handles and all this, but you go down the hall where these individuals walk by and it's what it was previously. but they always referred to them as patients. And I said, you can call them a patient, but they're an inmate. They are in custody because they committed a crime. And I had a deputy who was assaulted by one of these individuals, and second deputy came in to help. And these two deputies, so one of them was like 330 pounds, 6'4", big guy.
Right.
The other guy came in, was about 6 foot, about 240. And the inmate that attacked the deputy was, I don't know, 5'10", 220, whatever it was. And the fight's on.
But not small. Yeah.
No, not small. So but you got almost 700 pounds on this guy. And one of the deputies takes out the taser and does a drive stun, zaps him right in the thigh. And the guy, boom, hands out. We ended up having to meet with a state doctor that ran the state behavioral health because they objected to us using a taser.
What?
And I sat there and I argued with the doctor that was running the program. But the state, the doctor of the state office, he kind of sat back and I said, look, history, data will show you the more you fight, the more power and control we try to exert on this individual, the more he's going to fight. The more he fights, the more we fight. And I said, somebody's going to get hurt. You zap him with a taser. Boom, hands out, fight over. They didn't understand the concept that the taser was not a punishment. The taser is intended to break that OODA loop, to get him to stop and whoa, what the hell am I doing? But the fight was over. And that was just, and that was in 2018, 17, 18, before I retired. And that was a mentality, but even going on into the school districts now and how we're dealing with that. And I'm not opposed to some of these issues. And I know I have friends and family and individuals I know that have children with special needs. I'm not discounting that. As a Marine, I obviously have a few things not right in my head. But you look at that and some of these concepts that, I've seen parents, family come in and cuss out and they're screaming and fighting with everybody. So where do the kids learn it? And it just floors me that we've gotten away from it. It's not a discipline. Like in the Marine Corps, we have what I refer to. This goes back to I have a graduate degree, so I try to make it sound fancy, but I call it indoctrination into the culture of our organization in the Marine Corps. It's basically hazing,
hazing has its place.
It does. It's part of the culture.
It right in there, by the way. Hi.
Yeah. Hey, Tom. Nice to meet you.
Sorry,
everybody. Tom's here now. So to give Tom a quick brief on our guest, his name is Randall Doizaki. And he
I did read the profile.
Yeah, but this is not in there. A retired lieutenant from Arapahoe County Sheriff's, and he now runs public safety for schools.
Interesting.
Yeah, I told him all about you, and
we can talk about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they actually recruited me through LinkedIn. I retired on Friday and started there on a Monday, and I think they've regretted it ever since.
Well, so I will say this, and this is one of those kind of things where it was said to me by an SRO guy, had 20 years of experience, and he said to me about the education system. He says, "Listen, let me explain something to you that as a cop, I hope you'll take with you and understand in the spirit it's intended, because this is coming from 20 plus years of SRO experience." And I said, "Yes, go ahead." I was ready. And he said, "Teachers are the only people in the planet who never left school."
Yes.
That's true.
And I went, gotcha. I processed it and I went, got it. That helps. And it has helped me immensely to understand how different the teacher mindset is than the police mindset. And we can get into this at some point, but I've talked about the curve difference between, 25 years ago, law enforcement got slapped in the face with the Columbine events, right?
I was on duty. I drove by that school. I lived in that neighborhood. And
I remember asking my old man, because I was not a cop yet. I was just about to go to the academy, just about to get hired on. It was probably a year, 2 years later I was in the academy. But I asked him once I was receiving training, so call SWAT, contain and call SWAT, right? And he goes, I And I said, what, you're shaking your head. He goes, well, yes, that's what they were taught to do.
Yes.
The public has a right to demand that they do more.
Yeah.
And we got into a discussion, and I said, well, I mean, we know what to do. That's how we got Charles Whitman in the bell tower in Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
We knew
He was a Marine, by the way, I was told.
It's true. But the only way, but that was an active shooter response to an active shooter but they didn't call it that. It was just two cops going and doing their job to take Whitman out because he was killing people.
Yes.
And then you flash forward past the I said, you know, the SLA shootout and Black Panthers and all these things that happened in the 60s. And then LAPD invents SWAT.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bunch of departments follow suit and say, this is a good idea. We need a tactical team. But then all of a sudden, at some point, it shifted and it became all about the tactical team.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
we as law enforcement officers, we learned from that. And it took, I would say, a good 10 years before we really felt we were in a good space where we knew what we were doing. We'd seen it used. You know, it was a proven business model for active shooter responses, and we'd refined it. When I got in, it was wait for the first 4 guys and go in. Right now, it's the first guy up goes in. Right.
Yep.
I don't know what you guys called it. Did you guys call it MACTAC as well? I don't know what the other agencies.
No, that's it. That's your agency thing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just MACTAC.
No.
Yeah, I don't even know what it stands for.
I mean, there's lots. There's alert. There's this. That's one of the ones going around is the alert training. Yeah. There's so many. But anyway, then we had to change our mindset about SROs, right? And so we had to stop putting. We had to look at some of these other places where maybe the school resource officer and or some of the responsible responding officers weren't maybe as dialed in as they should have been. Some of them may have been retired on duty. Some people may have been put out to pasture. I won't cast aspersions on any one particular person, but we've all seen and heard anyway.
Yes.
With Texas.
But
yes.
Well, yeah. Beyond Texas. The one before that, do you remember in Florida?
Yep.
The SRO didn't even go in.
Stood there and waited.
Another thing we were talking about was a little bit of cowardice going on nowadays, and it's like they're afraid of backlash from the top, and they just don't act.
But maybe you can speak to this, Randall, because this is something I was thinking about then. So in education then, law enforcement had 10 years to perfect, 5 years to kind of then start to really refine it and bring it to school districts.
Yes.
The principals at the time, the young principals at the time had all come up in an education system that didn't have to deal with this or
they didn't really have to deal with it. It's an unknown.
Yes. So now you get school districts. I think they're probably 10 years behind the curve. Now here we are in 25 years after Columbine. I would say that you're starting to see school districts go away from the old guard who came up in an era where SROs were retired on duty cops and there wasn't this real need for the school to be tactical. They're phasing out and they're retiring out. And now what you're seeing is the teachers that came up in an era where Columbine happened, I think 5 years after I graduated high school.
Oh, I'm feeling old. I was a patrol deputy here. I was on duty the day Columbine happened, and I live in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and see, for me, like I was already out of high school, but one of the guys I know, he was a senior. He had just graduated high school, basically, and then it happened. And so he became a teacher, and all through college and all through his entire teaching career, he considered this kind of stuff. Now that he's a principal, he has that embedded in his principal DNA, right?
Yes.
Right.
So we're seeing, I think, the educational system finally catch up on that learning curve of this is the new normal. This is how we do things now. Is that what you're seeing?
And so I'm seeing a little bit of the both sides. We still have those individuals that don't like the law enforcement presence. They don't like that armed presence. It's, there's still that debate about weapons detections or metal detection systems in schools. And we just saw it recently where a weapons detection, the AI system, whatever, did not function properly.
Yeah. So they sold them an AI system that would recognize a weapon. And then for whatever reason, let's say if you're talking about physical let's just say it could have been as simple as the camera was placed wrong and it
Correct.
wasn't, it couldn't get a
Correct.
good enough view.
Right.
Or
And-
he came in a group and you
Came in a
only
group.
saw the people in the peripheral.
But
But
here's
you
the
look at some of-
expectations. If you have the AI, if you have cameras that say they can do that and they
Mhm.
don't, that's
Yes.
where you're up shit's creek.
Well,
there's
but
always gonna be a
everybody
flaw.
relies on that. They
Yeah.
look at it and they think that's the solution. But like you said with the SROs, I remember the cops here in Denver when I grew up, and there was a couple you didn't mess around.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
I'll bet.
I'd much rather the police take me than send me home with my parents.
Yeah.
But you look at the relationship building, and so here with Arapahoe County, I was the negotiation sergeant for 6 years. So I worked with our SWAT team. So I'm one of those guys, talk them out.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mhm.
And we had that discussion with the tactical guys, and being a Marine, I'm all about, hands-on type stuff. But we had that discussion, and we had a situation where SWAT responded. They were doing a warrant, executing a warrant with somebody, one of the other municipalities. And they didn't take the negotiators. And I called the lieutenant out on it. I said, you failed to deploy your resources. He said, what are you talking about, Sergeant? I said, if it had gone bad and you didn't have negotiators there, the perception is you meant to go in guns blazing. I said, you can't do that. And that's some of the mindsets. So you look at what the SROs are seeing now, and the officers I've had the honor to work with in the school, some phenomenal officers, that relationship building, and they identify, and some of these officers, they work with the SROs, and they said, something's up with this kid. And one of the things I always push in the personal coaching and all this stuff that I do outside of my duties is I talk about 5 words or less. I said, you have to have 5 words, engage with people. You talk with people, and the students will tell you everything. If you say, hey, I like the backpack.
Absolutely.
Hey, how'd your team do this week? And oh, that sucked. You ready for the Super Bowl? What's your favorite team? Who you got your odds on in the game? You build that rapport, and you're seeing more SROs like that. You're seeing more school safety. The downside is you still have those officers, and I've been there. I walk through the schools, and I will ask them, hey, whose classroom is this? I don't know. I think what do you mean you think? But one of the things I've done, and I actually, the FBI LEDA magazine that just came out recently, I had an article published in that magazine, and it's about the necessity for cross training between school safety staff and law enforcement. You go in there, the staff at the school know the ins and outs. I'd walk to school with an officer. I said, if it happens in the office, what's the quickest way to get an armed officer in here and to that location? Well, this door over here. Then you need to call out. It's the door in the northwest corner of the building, goes up the stairwells. I will meet the officers at that door. But we're not training our people. And again, some of that goes to the school leaders. People refer to the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it seems like more schools need to have more of that tactical mindset if shit goes south. And every teacher, every administrator there, whether you're a secretary, a principal, vice principal, fucking PE teacher, they need to have that tactical mindset, because if shit goes south, you need to be able to know and orient yourself so that you can give proper directions to the responding officers coming in. Because if you have an active shooter, you got to be able to give that info out.
I go back to my prior statement about how teachers are the only people that never left school, right?
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, Chuck, if you get into education, right? You get into education for a very specific reason.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That makes you a specific kind of person.
Yes.
If you get into law enforcement, you get into it for a specific reason.
Yes.
Right.
It means you're a specific kind of person.
Yes.
Typically not the same two people.
Not even.
At least
So
I
have relatives who are teachers. My sister-in-law she's getting ready to retire. Her full career teaching, and she deals with special ed. My wife, 2 nieces, they're both in education, and one of them, she got out. She said she's just tired of some of these kids, and the other one is currently teaching middle school, or like middle school, high school, and she talks about some of the kids are in the classes are just disruptive. But I'll take it beyond that, Chuck. When the last election, so I also ran for sheriff here in Jefferson County during the last election. I did not get the party nomination, but during a town hall meeting, I had So this was 2-3 years ago. And I'm in a town hall meeting, meet and greet type thing. And I've got a couple that comes in, probably about my age or a little bit older. And they say they went out and said, hey, Randall, we bought a gun because all these home invasion, all these burglaries. And we went out and trained. And I said, okay, you shot at some paper targets. And he says, and the first 3 rounds are blanks. And I'm like, excuse me? You go, what? He says, well, I don't want to hurt anybody. I said, you better think about it. Do you think the guy breaking in your house has blanks?
Mm-hmm.
No.
And that led up to the discussion about having armed civilian staff in schools. Do we allow, and I know there's some rural school districts, they have to, but again, that's the culture in that school district. But I said
but in a rural, here, let me back this up. In a rural school district, they are the first responders.
They are.
Number one. Because cops are a long way away. That's right. That's point one. Point two, there are probably the cops and the teachers are probably on a first name basis because that area is so small.
Correct.
That everybody knows everybody. Correct. So they know when they respond to that school who's involved, going to be an armed teacher and who it's going to be, right? They know the options. But not so in standard districts. And this is one of the things that I've talked about. Correct. So this is why, because my question to you, Randall, and so I'll say that, and then I'll say this, and then I'll ask my question. I have always said that if you are in a school with a firearm and the police come through the door ready to do the Lord's work, if they don't recognize you immediately as some sort of a teacher,
you're not dead. Yes.
You're going to be unliked, right?
You're a threat.
That coupled with police officers train non-stop just to carry a firearm, let alone to be the guys that go into a school to fire a weapon. And they're terrified to do it. Nobody wants to do that. If you've truly trained for it, you know you don't want to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it's not a fun
situation. Now you got teachers, right? So do you have teachers that train enough, and do they have? Okay. So herein lies my thought process. Knowing what I said about teachers being the only people that didn't left school, and knowing that I had teachers growing up that I wouldn't trust to own a gun in their home, let alone in my classroom.
I wouldn't trust them with a sharp knife.
But your point is well taken, that teachers and schools need training. And we've just identified that the teachers and cops are cut from very different fabrics.
Yes.
Very.
So
I don't want somebody untrained addressing a threat.
Correct.
So when I was running for sheriff, we had that came up, and I said, there are 3 questions I ask, and I asked these individuals there, these are parents, these are community members. I said 3 things I ask. Number 1, what is their proficiency? And you just hit on it, Tom. I said, any one of you sitting here can go shoot at a paper target all day long and get a nice tight group. Mm-hmm. You jack that up. You got sirens, you got screaming, you got all sorts of crap going on.
The scene with the rocks. Can you do it when it matters in battle?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to handle it. You're not conditioned for it. And that goes back to some of the conversation earlier about the mindset, even with the newer officers and some of the mind shift we see in law enforcement is it's like that mental conditioning. I go out and my family will tell you, I'm not looking at, the people walking that, are casual. I'm looking at who's a threat. I walk into a place and I identify who's a threat. Who do I need to watch? And even to this day, and I'm over 60, and I still watch.
Yeah.
So I said, that's question 1. Question 2, where are they going to carry it? If you have a gym teacher teaching a gym class, they better not have the gun on while they're in that class.
Right.
If you have a teacher who's wearing a skirt or wearing business attire, how are they carrying it? And if it's not on the person, where is it secured? It better not be in a desk drawer that's not locked. And if it is locked up, what good is it if they're in the other of the building?
Right.
And then the third thing, and I think you hit it on the head there, Tom, and I said, are they prepared to take action knowing it will result in the death of another person, whether it's the subject of threat or a student, because these walls, most of these schools are not designed to stop around. And in law enforcement, at least here in Colorado, you get 100, you have to score 100% to be hired to pass an academy. But then that proficiency drops down. It depends on the agency. It's usually about 80%. You can drop 2 or 3, for Colorado Post. But those 2 or 3 is to allow that margin of error. I also ran the critical response team. I worked with the 18th Judicial District investigating officer-involved shootings within the district, a lot of multiple agencies. And we had a SWAT team take a guy out, and they sent like 30 rounds downrange at this guy. And all the way on the other end of the parking lot, there was a small hole in the back window of a car that was consistent with a .223 round. We didn't find the round because it went somewhere in the car and they never found it. But even with that proficiency, somebody misplaced a round. So are they prepared? And I don't think people are. I don't think, and I think that's one of the issues that people are not. And I say this about officers, and it always got me in trouble with HR or with the sheriff's office whenever I sat on a hiring panel. They come down these questions, and they've got their scripted questions. And my graduate degree is in organizational leadership HR, so I'm very familiar with that side. But you read the questions, and when they give you an opportunity, and I'd always kind of bait them a little bit, and I'd ask them, "Have you been in a fight?" Well, yeah. And I said, "No, I'm not talking a little slap fight. I mean a knockdown, drag out, get your butt kicked fight. Are you experienced? Have you been hit?" Well, not really. I said, "Well, be ready because it's coming, and it's got your name on it," and HR would be sitting there shaking their head. But the reality is that fear, and I go back to some of the issues that growing up, that I was a scrapper and I looking for a fight. I never backed down. And yeah, I probably should have in some of those because it ended up getting me in trouble. But they don't have that. There isn't that fist fight in the parking lot, shake hands and you're over. Now it's quick and it's on social media. The fight's going on, and it's on social media before the fight's over.
Well, so herein lies, because we just figured out kind of the crux is the two different. Can they answer those 3 questions? And we know that most of them are probably firmly in the negative category,
right?
On a lot of those things. So how, when you know that the data shows that putting teachers in schools and then running live fire drills or running drills with actual casualties or fake casualties, that it can traumatize some to the point where they won't return to work. Right. Correct. And I get that. So my question to you then is, how far can law enforcement push the educational community, the teachers? How far can they push what they train them with before teachers are going to break? Right. That's kind of my question.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Columbine, they took a school here in Jefferson County in Colorado. They took a school that was no longer being used and turned it into the Frank DeAngelis Training Center. Frank DeAngelis was a principal at Columbine when the shooting occurred. And I know staff at Columbine who have recently retired. And they said a lot of the school staff are getting back into that complacent attitude where they're kind of, but and so it goes back to that mindset, to the regular drills. It goes back to the trainings, and you do an annual training, quarterly training, just like in, with the sheriff's office as a lieutenant, we used to have to create a quarterly drill, and it was a critical incident in the jail, and we'd respond. We'd set up. You got in a little trouble. Set up some smoke alarms. We were using the fog machine, but little things like that. But how do you do that in a school district, in schools, when you have community members and even the children?
I think I can answer that. We had a guest on our show probably about a year ago, and he's a Marine, and he works for a school now. And he actually, I don't know if he works in Texas, or I think it's probably Texas, one of those states that's like super pro 2A and all that stuff. But he actually started up a thing at a school, and I don't know, Tom, if you remember him. He came on and he was talking to us about how he stood up a whole thing with teachers where he takes them out, because I guess he's a range master or something like that, or he's accredited in it. I don't know, but he was teaching them how to shoot and teaching them how to respond, and he would keep the gun in a locked safe inside of their classroom. So if something was to go down, they'd be able to get their gun and react and get their kids over there. But they would work with deputies and things like that, or police officers, and they would do multiple trainings per year, and all the teachers were excited for it. They were gung-ho about it, and and that's the way that they were going about protecting their school, because they know that where they were, law enforcement's going to take a hot minute to get there, so they need to be able to react if they have an active shooter.
Yes.
And there's part of that
you're
that I
talking about
like.
those rural communities again,
Right.
You
I don't know
can't do
how
that.
rural it was, but
Yeah, you can't
Yeah,
do that.
I mean,
You can't do that in a
No, you
major
can't.
metropolitan area.
yeah, I get it.
So
One of
how
those-
far can you push the teachers? Do you go to a classroom full of teachers and say, hey, if you're going to keep a baseball bat behind your desk, you better here's where you tactically hide so that you have the tactical advantage, because most of your attackers aren't going to slice the pie. So sit in your deep corner, and then as soon as he shows his head, you're going to have to hit it hard enough to crack a watermelon.
Yeah.
Do you tell them that kind of detail?
I don't think, and that's one of the challenges, even talking to my own relatives, like I said, my sister-in-law, teacher is talking to her about addressing those threats. To me, you take the baseball bat, you take the firearm out of it, you look at the mindset and that conditioning. Are they recognizing? Like I said, all of us probably, when I go on a trip, I'm identifying where the exits, where the egress. I'm looking at.
You got to have the Jason Bourne mindset. You got to have your head on a swivel. But how much?
Even talking to people, Tom, how many people? I'm willing to bet every one of us, we get in that automatic when something's happening. We turn and we ended up in a bladed stance, feet spread apart, our chin is stuck.
Muscle memory.
Yeah, my daughter had been in a couple conflicts and it never escalated. And I take my glasses off and I put my glasses down. I'm nearsighted. You don't want to be downrange when I have my glasses off. Bad business.
Yeah.
But she knows. She says, "Uh-oh, Daddy's taking his glass off." And that's it with me. But it's an automatic instinctive thing. It's just that gesture, because people don't condition. You look at sport athletes, and that's one of the things I do in a classroom or training sessions is I'll take a racquetball and I'll sit there and say, okay, how many of you in this room are athletes? How many of you play racquetball, baseball, football, something, like that? And they say, oh yeah. I said, okay, can you catch this when I throw it at you? And deliberately when I throw it at you, I say, you will see them push back in their chair. They're getting set. But then I set the racquetball down and I say, okay, I'm not going to throw it at you. But in our profession, it's coming and you may not see it coming.
Right.
But again, how do you help individuals whose primary focus is providing education, or administrators, or even school facility maintenance staff? How do you help them look at that? Because they don't think the same. So it comes down to those conversations and the rapport building and that relationship. I go in and I talk to office staff. I walk a building with one of my supervisors and I say, hey, how you doing? They're going down the hall. Oh, great. He's talking to somebody else. But people call and they say, hey, we got this, we got that. But that goes back to us. That goes to us as officers working and stopping in. If an officer's in the neighborhood, get your butt out of the car, go in, spend 5 minutes. I would take coffee to a couple of the schools. I'd take my own coffee pots and go in and have coffee with the deans and sit in their office and talk with them. But I don't think we're ever going to truly change that. It's going to be an ongoing challenge.
Well, and I will say this, I think that just the same way it takes a very specific type of person to become a teacher and a very specific type of person to become a cop. Now let's narrow it down a little further. I have learned that it is a very specific type of person that should be the subculture group school resource officer.
Yes. That's a different breed in itself.
You have to your point, you have to be able to bridge that gap. You have to be able to talk to cops, and then you have to be able to kind of turn it off. Yes. And in some places, you have to still do it in full uniform in your black and white, right? Not every SRO gets to wear a polo shirt and
correct. You're in full uniform, all equipment, vest, and everything.
Yep. Yeah, and then you gotta turn around and do the aw shucks, ma'am.
Yeah.
With these people and make them feel at home and make them feel comfortable and all that kind of stuff. And you have to learn how to be able to make safety recommendations and learn how to make criticisms or bring up issues and not have it come across like your badge is, 12 inches wide and 20
Yes.
inches tall. You know,
Right.
it takes a different person who can do those kinds of communication styles successfully
Yeah.
and has a tactical mindset and a heart for
Yes.
children. So
Right. Take the contempt of cop out of it, and
Yes.
you know, have the good community policing, but be able to be able to be a pipe hitter when you need to be. You know what I mean? And be able to go and handle your freaking business.
the way the world is hands off right now, I could
Oh, yeah.
been an SRO.
Oh yeah, that's so
Because
crazy.
I mean, you and I have a friend. Well, Chuck, he'll show up in our locker room live. He was a school police officer. He was a school resource officer, and I knew him. He was at my high school, and I saw him knock kids' dicks in the dirt because that was the time where if you messed with the cops, they brought ass whooping.
Yep.
And
That's
the
how I
parents-
grew up.
nobody said shit. It was, man, you got your ass kicked by the police.
But it
Right.
also started in the homes. The parents would say, "You said what?
Yeah.
Right.
You get home, your parents, you
That's
better
your
call
environment.
him sir, ma'am."
Yes.
And we were raised to, and I'm not saying to be complacent. We
No.
were raised with some foundation and some rules. But even as a patrolman, as a patrol deputy, I had a box in my car, those little FI cars on the juveniles I contacted in my neighborhood. I got to know them. I would show up at their house. I was invited to graduation parties, block parties, because of that relationship. I learned at an early now, and I don't think we talked much about that time. I was 31 when I started law enforcement, so I had a little time under my belt and that relationship building. So I went out on my way to get to know these kids. I went on my way to check in with them. Someone going to law enforcement. Unfortunately, a couple that I dealt with, one particular kid that I worked regularly with, ended up going to prison for a drive-by shooting. But again, it's some of those. It was this kid was his mother had died from drug overdose. His dad ended up in prison. He was living with his grandparents, and I'd go by and check on him regularly. He got involved. They were involved in a ICP, the Insane Clown Posse.
He's a juggalo.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And these kids, so every time I saw them, they were getting patted down, and they said, "Why are you going to mess with a Deputy D?" Well, you're usually up to something that's going to get somebody in trouble, and it's not going to happen while I'm on duty.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to know them, and the grandparents called me when he was involved in the shooting, and they asked me, as a sergeant at the time when the shooting occurred, it was in investigations. And I said, "There's not much I can do for him now. Everything I tried." And the young man said, "Yeah, he should have listened. He should have taken the advice, but he listened to his buddies and those little juggalos out there, and that's got him in trouble. We can't save them all."
Now, how about this one for you on that? Was there ever a point where you felt like, yeah, I'm reaching this kid, I'm getting through to him?
Yes.
Or was this a kid where it was like, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm never getting through this kid?
There were a few that I was getting through to, and they would call and they would ask about advice. There's this young man I'm working with now. He's actually a grandson of a lady I'm associated with. I'm mentoring him, and that's totally separate from my own business that I do with the coaching and stuff, to help this kid, because he's asking for some help. He's willing to sit down and be realistic about it, because he knows I have no relation. You know, there are kids that this kid in particular that I was talking about that went to prison. He did something on my days off, and my district partner dealt with it. And the grandfather told me, "Hey, you hear what happened?" And I go over there, and he shoved his grandmother. So grandfather came out and knocked him. It just hit him right in the face. And I said, "Be thankful it was your grandfather and not me." "Well, you're going to be like that, Deputy, because I'm not related to you. I'm not holding back."
Right.
But it was a mutual, it was a respect. It wasn't a fear. It wasn't intimidation. It wasn't the kid was bigger than me. I was in a lot better shape. I'm a certified personal trainer. I was working out a lot at that time, and a lot bigger and in better shape. And I said, "But it's not about that. It's about you doing what's right and showing the courtesy and respect and helping those morals." And that's what I'm seeing with a lot of the youth. They're missing that.
Let me ask you this. Do you think the decline of respect for the youth has for authority is contributing to the decline of our society right now?
I would say yes. There's none of that. You know, our daughter was raised, we're sitting out having ice cream. This is when she's younger. She's probably in middle school. She gets up and goes over and opens the door for an elderly couple. The wife's coming in with a walker and husband trying to help her in. We raised our daughter. That's how you do it. that's how we were raised. You go out of your way, but we're not seeing a lot of that. And part of it, they talk about the latchkey kids. When I was growing up, the parents are working, or they're a single parent home and they're trying to keep a roof over their head. But also the social media, there's that instant gratification and all this stuff that's going on. I don't know how to deal with some of that. I
How do you
taught
think we should fix it?
I think more of it is about conversation. I taught constitutional law and American government, adjunct college faculty, and have those discussions with young adults in their 20s. And we're talking about the foundation of the Constitution and the principles and the laws that are out there and why are they there. And somebody say, oh, we throw out the Constitution. I said, and then you have nothing. Everything you have today is based on the Constitution. And I said, what was the Bill of Rights about? Keeping government out of your business. They just don't, they're uneducated. Like you said, going back to the education system, Tom, they don't have that education understanding about that foundation. And I catch a lot of grief as a Mason, and they talk a lot about the founding fathers. A lot of them were Masons, and it's about taking over. I said, no, you're talking about something you don't understand because you've never looked into it. You don't understand what's going on with cops. And one of the things, and we laugh about it, I taught our daughter how to drive. My wife didn't want to teach her, but I would grill my daughter. I said, who was in the car in front of us? Can you see the driver? Male, female, young, old, black, white, doesn't matter. Can you? No. Okay. Well, neither can I. What about the car going the other direction at night? Can you tell who's driving that car? No. He said, well, then don't get upset with somebody because a law enforcement officer stops the vehicle. It's not the person they're stopping. There's something going on. It's behavior. You contact somebody, and it's that education and that lack of understanding, but also there's no faith. There's no, I don't care what the religion is. I'm not saying you have to be religious, but we don't see any of that boundaries. We don't see any of that anymore as much. Block parties, few and far between. Very few communities that I've seen anymore have block parties where they block it up. We used to do that growing up.
Most people don't even want to talk to their neighbors.
They don't.
And I think a lot of the problems have to do with these helicopter parenting. Like they don't want to discipline their kids. They want to be their kid's best friend. And I'm like, there's a time and a place for raising children and teaching them respect. And I feel like you're not your kid's best friend. And if they get upset with you, you're doing your fucking job. When they turn 18 and you've done your job and they're respectful and they understand society, they understand why cops are doing what they're doing, because you're giving them that education. And I think it's kind of difficult too, because a lot of people don't have that knowledge of why cops do what they do. And I think that also falls on law enforcement to educate the citizens, the kids, the adults, so they understand this is why we do certain things. And I think that's the biggest downfall right now, is that there's not enough cops or not enough agencies out there explaining exactly what we do. And you're starting to see some of it with like officer involved shootings and critical incidents, but there has to be more knowledge given out, whatever it be, a town hall. And these are the reasons why we stop people. This, like what you're talking about, we're stopping a vehicle.
Sir, this is why I kicked 100% of your ass.
That's why it ended up this way.
It wasn't because you were black. It wasn't because you were Asian or white or Hispanic. No. It was because you
fucked
had
up
a clear violation. We couldn't see you were speeding. You do X, Y, and Z, and that's why we're stopping you. And I think more of that education will help society. I don't know. I feel like it's just we're on a downward slope and it's not good. And we need to start trending upward and start teaching respect and actually start being hands-on with our fucking kids. I think that's
in the college classroom. I put my name on the board. This is how I'd always start my classes when a new term. I put my last name on the board, and I would ask the students. I said, my last name is Doizaki. What is my family heritage? And they'd say, you're Russian, Polish, German, Irish. And I said, nope, you're all wrong. And I said, Doizaki's actually Japanese. And they give me that look. Now, my mother's Irish and Norwegian. My biological father was German. But I was raised in a Japanese Buddhist home. Doizaki is Japanese. And they're like, and I said, every one of you just profiled me as a white male to get the name to fit the look. So when law enforcement gets called on a scene or law enforcement gets called about somebody, and if you go back and look at some of these situations where law enforcement has shot somebody, or there's been it escalated and somebody ends up in jail or somebody ends up hurt or whatever, a lot of those are when law enforcement are called to the location. It's not an automatic, hey, we're just going to go contact this guy. Most officers are doing that anyway in general, just saying, hey, hi, how you doing? But that's how I would start the classroom. I'd say, you profiled me. We don't stop and think. And we make, so one of the newsletters, I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I talked about the assumptions, and I said, we make those assumptions and they make an ass out of you, me. And that's a prime example, those interactions that we have in the community. It's the same thing in anything that you have. You go into a store. I talked with my wife, we went to a store and we're home, Lowe's doing some home renovation. And I'm in the regular, they say, oh, he's back again. But I engaged a young lady at the register. My wife and I are standing right there. I said, now my wife knows who the lady is that I'm seeing all the time when I come in here. And it's an engagement. And she laughed a little bit. We talk a little bit. People don't do that. They've gotten away from that social skill.
Oh, my mom still doesn't.
Yeah, and that's
she ought to.
that's great to me. I talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
But so there's a lot contributing to it, but I think it comes back to individuals like us, our peers, our circle of influence. We've got to be the catalyst. We've got to encourage that.
Yeah, of course.
Well, how about
More
this?
guns in schools.
We're wrapping up. What? More guns in schools? No.
Yeah, I think we just got to find out who has them. They give us some ammo.
Yeah, right. And qualified individuals. I think that's gonna be
again, dude. You're asking.
I'm not talking about teachers
to be a wolf.
Right. I mean, there's certain teachers that I think can do it, and there's certain teachers I think can't, because like you said,
and there's a lot of teachers that are probably going, I got into teaching not to be tactical. If this is what teaching is that I have to learn how to murder people, I don't want to get out.
They get out. They're not there.
Yeah. And so you have to, I think you have to find that happy medium of what, like I said, how far can you push a teacher to give them that mindset that they need? Mm-hmm. And then let law enforcement bridge the rest of the gap. But competent law enforcement.
But you have to ask the questions, open-ended, engage in that conversation. Yeah. How can we help? How would you deal with this? What would be a concern about this? What is your concern about that? Open that. Yeah. Don't be afraid of those conversations.
So now, Randall, we always give our guests at the end of each episode a chance to dedicate their episode to whomever they would like. It's usually a brother, sister, officer, or a fellow veteran, or somebody who has passed on. And we understand you have your dedication. Yeah.
So when I was talking to Chuck originally signing in, my father, first generation Japanese American, he was his parents, my grandparents came to us in the late 1800s, raised in a Japanese farming community, and his time in the military. And I know other Japanese Americans that or Americans of Japanese ancestry, and the challenges they had serving. My uncle ended up as a translator after the war in Japan and things like that. But my dad, him and I butted heads, a lot of battles, but he was true. And he taught me a lot as a veteran and the foundation about serving the country. And for me, it's God, country, family first, and Corps, of course, but I'm an old Marine.
Well, we did you want to give your dad's name or no?
Thomas Tomio Doizaki.
Yes. Well, rest easy. We've got it from here. Chuck, what do you have for us?
Well, I want to say thank you, Randall, so much for coming on. You have so much stories. I mean, going back from when you were basically held hostage as a child with your family to joining the military, to going into law enforcement, and then still continuing that service to go into public safety. I say thank you so much for doing that. And there's
glad to be there.
People like you. Thank you. And I want to say thank you for all today for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on Instagram at war_stories_official, and our Facebook at War Stories Podcast. If you're already following, we really appreciate if you could share the posts and help spread the word. You can also check us out on the link in our bio on both platforms to find all of our social media links, and website. Our podcast is available on all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. Make sure to hit that notification bar, subscribe, do all that, because when we go live or when we post something, you want to be the first to see it. So please follow us, subscribe, notification bell. If you'd like to support us, head over to our website, www.warstoriesofficial.com. Grab some gear. Still have some gear left. Do you have a story to tell? Or you know someone who does? We're always looking for law enforcement, corrections officers, dispatchers, firefighters, medics, veterans, and ER nurses and ER doctors. authors to feature on the show. If you're interested, email us at booking.warstories@gmail.com. And you can also find us at LinkedIn and message us there, and our Dylan Deucer will get back to you if you want to be a part of the show and you think you have a story. Go to linkedin.com/War Stories Podcast. We'd love to have you on. And if you know someone who'd be a great fit, give them that info. And you can also follow us on TikTok at tiktok.com/War Stories Locker Room. Thank you for all the support. Stay safe out there.
And until our next episode, come home with your shield or on it.
Stay safe.
Absolutely.
All right.